This week, we welcome writer Brad Polumbo.
I'm actually a cusper of Gen Z millennial. And with Gen Z, it's like, I have a really hard time getting them to care about privacy at all. They're like,
do not care about
what? The government's spying on me. Oh, hey, my FBI agent. Hope he likes it. Like, they know that, like, for example, TikTok, I think, monitors keystrokes that you do on other apps and stuff. It's like, it's got some creepy privacy invasion stuff going on that app. But they don't care. Gen Z's literally like, whatever, what do I care? Because they're used to their whole lives being public anyway, or at least a fake version of them on Instagram.
This is Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you are welcome. You know the drill. Please subscribe, rate, comment, share, reach out, tell your friends, send smoke signals, whatever. We love your feedback and we want to hear from you. If you like our work and want to support us, the best way to do that is join Phetasy.com. You'll get access to behind-the-scenes content, outtakes, discounts on merch, and the ability to submit questions for some of our upcoming guests. Support your favorite scrappy little internet heroes at Phetasy.com. Well, let's get into it. I'm with Brad Polumbo, everybody. Welcome to Walk-Ins Welcome. It's so good to have you here. It's been...
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been... I feel like we've been talking about it for a while, so it's always nice to actually sit down and make the conversation happen, put it on the books. And
yeah, you must have a lot of guests because you were booked out months in advance. I was like, wow.
Yeah, we have, because I try to... It's this weird balance of staying ahead. I like to have some in the can. And I try to keep this podcast as evergreen as possible. It's not like we're, churning out the hot takes of the day on the podcast. I really like it to be more about people's stories and grit and resilience. But because of the nature of the people I talk to, inevitably culture stuff comes up. And sometimes that stuff is grounded in the news cycle. So I have to balance being somewhat ahead and also not too far ahead, because then if we talk about something that's current, if it launches in a month, it will sound dated.
Yeah, well, my story is not something I've talked about a lot, but something I'm more than happy to talk about. So,
yeah, I would love to hear your story. I think, a lot of people probably know you from your writing and from your what do you consider yourself? Like a writer, a media personality, pundit?
Well, that's actually part of the story, I guess. I wanted to be a writer, but I still write for places like Newsweek, New York Post, the Washington Examiner, but I've kind of evolved into like a content creator, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, because that's just where people are at. So I do a lot of multimedia stuff now.
So you started migrating to content creation, but what kind of content are you creating? Is it still in the vein of media, news? Yeah.
Like political analysis and news. Like my take on the news, basically. So mostly like shorts, reels, TikToks, 60 to 90 seconds, me reacting to stuff or me commenting on a news, breaking down a story, because that's just how people consume their information now. It's, it's a little depressing. But when I have an article that's like a hit at Newsweek or one of these other publications, it might get 100,000 views. When I have a TikTok that's a hit, it might get 1.5 million, like one did last week.
Wow.
It's just a different scale and people's different habits. So like the days where you could be a newspaper columnist and have a full-time job to write 2 articles a week, those kinds of days are gone. And now in journalism and multimedia, and I do opinion journalism, but you don't work on an op-ed page anymore, really, unless you are kind of grandfathered into a legacy media job. But that's not really the future. And so I kind of view Instagram as the future. TikTok is far too precarious. I've been banned twice. I'm sure it's just a matter of time before I get the axe again.
What have you been banned for?
The first time was for defending Kyle Rittenhouse after he'd already been found not guilty by a jury of his peers.
Wow. So what did they ban you for?
They said I was inciting violence, which is their new catch-all. They just like to say for things they don't like. I was just saying, look, he shouldn't have been there. Kyle Rittenhouse, for folks that don't know, is the guy who went to one of these BLM riots. He brought a gun and he ended up killing 2 people. My take was really just that he shouldn't have been there. He never should have gone. But in the actual moment, the facts show that he fired the gun in self-defense, which is what a jury of his peers found after an extensive trial. And that got me banned from TikTok the first time. The second time, it was just like a series of violations. They said they were banning me for multiple terms of service violations, but actually I'd only had one. And then the others I'd appealed and been restored because I would get brigaded by haters. They would just mass report you and then you'd auto get your stuff banned. I think the truth is, like, I'm more on the libertarian side of the political spectrum. And meanwhile, TikTok is run by, like, indirectly a company that answers to the Communist Party of China. So
Right.
my vibe and my information that I'm giving out is not the kind of stuff they want succeeding on their platform. They want stuff succeeding on their platform that makes America weaker, really, like the really extreme. Because what's funny about TikTok, and sorry to rant about this, but
no, go on.
TikTok has tons. I'm kind of center right, right?
Yeah.
TikTok has tons of super far right people that are allowed to spew the craziest conspiracies, and they're not banned, they're not taken down. And then it has super far left people who talk about how their pronouns are zebras, or, like, you know, just all the kind of corrosive, confusing stuff that's when you're so open-minded that your brain falls out.
Yes.
And they let those extremes thrive, yet they ban people on the center right for basically milquetoast things. I think because they want the next generation of Americans. I mean, China's ultimately a competitor with us. We're in, like, kind of a Cold War style competition. I think they want Americans to be weak because they have TikTok in China, but it's a very different version. And they show people very different things. But in the US, I think they don't want reasonable voices to be reaching their massive audience on there. I think they want the extremes and the most polarizing, divisive, and conspiratorial people so that we tear ourselves apart so they don't have to.
Yeah, that's an interesting theory. And I know I've heard that the TikTok in China is very different than the one here, the stuff that they're seeing. There was an article actually that came out today in the New York Post, and it was a 30-year-old woman who posed as a 14-year-old boy just to see if they passively were on TikTok, what would they be fed by the algorithm? And it was all this misogyny and violence. And I sent it to my 14-year-old nephew, and he was like, I said, "You're about this age. Is this what the algorithm feeds you?" And he goes, "Please, that is a joke."
So the thing is, the algorithm is really good. That's the thing. It's scary.
Yeah, that's
good.
what I've heard. It's really good. He said your TikTok feed is based on what you like, what you search up, and just things that your keyboard has typed a lot. And I mean, he seems to be aware that these platforms are spying on him. So,
the trouble I've had with Gen Z, and I'm actually a cusper of Gen Z millennial, and with Gen Z, it's like, I have a really hard time getting them to care about privacy at all. They're like,
do not care about it.
The government's spying on me. Oh, hey, my FBI agent, hope he likes it. Like, they don't. Oh, but TikTok spying, they know that, like, for example, TikTok, I think, monitors keystrokes that you do on other apps and stuff. It's like, it's got some creepy privacy invasion stuff going on that app. But they don't care. Gen Z's literally like, whatever, what do I care? Because they're used to their whole lives being public anyway, or at least a fake version of them on Instagram. So I don't know how to make them care about privacy, but cat's a little bit out of the bag on that one.
Yeah, and he seems to think, that this woman, he said, and clearly she is 30. I don't know what that means exactly. But he said there's no way she was fed all that unless she was searching for things like that on Google or Instagram, etc. So he seems to be aware that
if I had to theorize, she probably was doing research, trying to figure out, like, oh, are all these kids getting Andrew Tate videos? So she's reading articles about Andrew Tate. You know, and people who don't know, he's like this toxic alpha male influencer guy who's super popular on TikTok with young boys. But he's, in my opinion, pretty sexist. Anyway, though, if she was Googling that and then she opened it up, of course it would show her that video right away, right? So, but I will say he does get promoted on that platform until very recently, where they've censored him. He was all over it. But that's, again, because people were liking it. It really just feeds you what you want. So the
Right.
problem is you. That's the
Right.
bad thing, is like, I think you can probably relate to this, but sometimes I despair at the absolute state of media in American politics, left and right. Conservative media has its own host of problems and issues. But then media ultimately, like, the things you hate about CNN or Fox News, depending what side you're on, are ultimately because of the viewers and the readers.
Right.
They pander to what you all, including myself, what we choose to click on, what we choose to tune in for. Like, the bad outcomes, the tribalist media, the sensationalism, the inflammatory content, all of that is simply a response. It is a symptom. It's not the disease.
Yeah.
The disease is what Americans are wanting, and what they want is hyperbole. What they want is partisan media. What they want is tribalist content owning the other side. And so that's what they get. So people love to hate on the media, and trust me, a lot of it is deserved, but ultimately the media is just holding up a mirror and reflecting back to the public what they're demanding, because they respond to market signals.
Yeah, that's so true. And I've said this for a long time, even about Trump, like, I knew he was going to win just because I had this tweet that it's down now, but I early on predicted it. And I said, Kim Kardashian made $75 million last year. Trump will be our next president. It just, those are our values. We are a reality show country. We're interested in Jerry Springer, and these phenomenon don't exist in some void. It's what people are watching, viewing, clamoring for, asking for, and it wasn't really that big of a surprise to me that he would be almost troll his way to becoming the troll in chief.
I mean, it depresses me a little bit, but it's true in my own content. The most viral videos I have are things where I'm debating somebody and, for lack of a better word, owning them, right? Those are and I don't do it by calling names or insulting them, but like owning their ideas is at least what I go for. So the clips that have 1.5 million on TikTok or 3 million on YouTube that I've posted are all from, like, I was on Dr. Phil once, and I was up against these like woke Gen Z people, going back and forth with them, debating things. And I did a debate recently about reparations for slavery, which is something I really disagree with. And I was going back and forth with an activist who supports it, kind of shutting down and rebutting his ideas. And it's like, what people reward with their clicks is combat. And I prefer, that's just the reality that we have to operate in.
It's so
I
true.
prefer to make it like a substantive combat, because I can live with that if it's about ideas. But the easier version is to just insult people and call names. And like, that's what a lot of it ends up devolving into. Like Trump, one of his things that he's known for is his nicknames of people, some of which are really good. That's why they stick. He is, and I have lots of criticisms of the man, but he is an excellent marketer.
Yes, he is. I think that I've been noticing too on your Twitter, you've been kind of going at it with people lately about a lot of the stuff, I think, more towards the right, more direct. Your ire seems to be directed at the right in some of these instances. You had an article out in Newsweek just today, I think, or yesterday about this. What will you tell us about that Newsweek article?
Yeah, so what's really funny to me is I'm an outspoken gay man. I'm on the right politically as a libertarian with a small L, pretty right wing. I've basically been disavowed from the liberal LGBT community a long time ago because, for example, I have serious concerns about children doing medical gender transitions.
Right.
And I think that, like, we have to acknowledge reality when it comes to sports and sex and things like that to prevent unfairness. But I have kind of a middle of the road position, very much a live and let live. Like, if an adult wants to be transgender, wants to get medical transition, I'm really powered to live your life how you feel happy. It's not my business. It's not my problem. And so I have this very middle of the road approach that managed to get me kicked off. I was actually kicked off a gay men's soccer team when I lived in DC for transphobia, because I don't support child transitions. But now I find myself in the position of defending trans rights on the right because people are going way too far in a pendulum swing right now, in my opinion. Basically, what's happened is until very recently, the right had become more libertarian on LGBT issues, more live and let live. A few years ago, it seemed like everybody was basically fine with gay marriage and gay rights. The trans stuff was a little more contentious, but even that, they were fine with adults doing whatever. But the far left has kind of pushed the extremeness on the gender stuff so far, whether it's a big activist group just put out a guide to neo-pronouns, when your pronouns are inanimate objects, right? When it's pushing irreversible medical treatments for minors at younger and younger ages, or it's like pretending that there's no such thing as biological sex in sports, and you're just a bigot if you have any concerns. They've gone so extreme, including some stuff like for example, I have no problem with drag shows. It's not really my thing, but it's perfectly fine in my book for adults. But you see some of these videos that people on the left are defending where it's like a man dressed up as a woman twerking and there's a child giving them money for tips.
Right.
That's unhinged.
Right.
That's obviously inappropriate. And yet a lot of people are defending that. And so it's triggered this backlash on the right where now you have the likes of Michael Knowles at CPAC on stage saying transgenderism entirely needs to be, quote, eradicated from society.
Right.
And he's called to legally ban adults from transitioning. And he's not alone in this. I think I've been really sensing this backlash, and it's partly in response to, like I said, really extreme movements on the left, but they're swinging the pendulum way too far back the other direction, in my opinion. And so I've been pushing back and saying, no, you got to respect the adults of freedom, the freedom of adults to live how they want and make decisions that you don't approve of, the same way you want that right for yourself. And I've got this kind of centrist position on this LGBT issue of live and let live. And increasingly, for a long time, because I didn't want to force the baker to bake the cake, the left said I was defending homophobia and I was, a sellout and all this. And now, because I'm defending the rights of trans people who are adults to live however they want, the right's telling me I'm a secret leftist. I've been accused of being woke, which is just really funny to anyone who knows me. And so I just feel like I'm pulling my hair out online these days because I'm caught between these two extremes on these social issues, these culture war issues that aren't actually very representative of the people I talk to in real life every day, but are so vitriolic, and they're reverting to these polar opposites. And I'm over here in the middle just saying my piece, and ultimately I'm not going to go along with any of it. I have no ambitions on becoming a politician or getting elected, so I don't have to go around. I'm also not doing this for-profit media thing, trying to audition for primetime TV. That's not what my career is going to be. So I don't feel the need to just pander or go along with the crowd on this just because that's where people are shifting. I'm going to say my piece and stake out my ground on this. And if backlash comes, and it is, that's okay. I signed up for this, doing what we do, creating content, speaking out about politics. You got to have thick skin, and I always have.
Yeah, I appreciate that you don't position yourself as a victim, because even people who are at the top of their field will pivot into being a victim the minute people come for them for their opinions, because they know it generates subscribers and clicks, and it's an easy way. I'm like, I'm not going to kick this victim can around and try and ask everybody for their money.
I post my hate mail for lulls sometimes.
That's fun though. You can do that stuff.
I'm not going to pretend I'm a victim because I get angry emails. I also get paid to talk for a living and write things for a living while other people have to roof houses and drive garbage trucks. So as far as I'm concerned, me and most of the media class on either side are privileged, incredibly privileged.
Yeah. I mean, although I think a lot of them would probably be far more content doing what they're doing, roofing and driving their trucks, than having to deal with the sociopaths in our field.
That's true.
Yeah. So tell me about the Newsweek piece that it seems to be going around quite a bit and getting some attention.
Basically, I'm just pushing back on the CPAC statements that were made, calling to eradicate transgenderism for public life. Now, in fairness to Michael Knowles, who's a commenter at the Daily Wire, some people have interpreted his comments to say he was calling for transgender people to be killed or put in camps.
Oh,
That's
right.
not
I
what
saw
he
some headlines
means.
like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what he means is eradicate transgenderism as an ideology and force people to live as the sex that they were born as. We don't need to like, I hate this thing the left does where when somebody says something bad, they have to act like they said something even worse.
Yeah.
But for me, just taking on the merits what he actually said, I think that's wrong. I think you have to have, if you're somebody on the right who believes in limited government, who believes in individual liberty, the things that Ronald Reagan would speak about when he said the heart and soul of conservatism is libertarianism. You have to have space for adults who want to live their lives in ways different from you or that you don't approve of. I mean, that's the test of freedom, right? It's easy to say you believe in freedom and then believe in it for the people that are like you, the people you agree with, the people with the same values as you. The real test of freedom is whether you still believe in it for the people you don't like, for the people you don't understand, for the people who make you uncomfortable or queasy. And that's the test of whether you actually believe in freedom or whether you're just a tribal automaton fighting for your side and you're willing to compromise your principles. I'm simply staking out the ground that that's not a path the right should go down. And I think, online it gets a lot of play, this extreme anti-trans position. But I think most people on the right, offline in real life, really do believe in kind of a sensible approach of let adults be adults, protect kids, acknowledge biological reality, but don't be hateful towards anyone, don't discriminate against anyone, and let adults live their life how they want as long as they're not infringing on anybody else. I think Americans across the board would broadly agree with that framework, but it's not the super online base that hypes up on Twitter and fills the replies on Twitter and or even on YouTube, the things that will get you the most clicks. The people on there aren't actually representative of the public because most of the public is politically disengaged because they feel despaired by it. They don't relate to either side. The only people that are left are the extreme ideologues on the left or right. Like the comments section on any platform is wildly unrepresentative of the readers of the article, of the viewers of the video, because only the most passionate 5% take the time out of their day to write a comment. Like the people I know in my life, they read articles, they watch videos, but they never comment on things. It's only the most diehard people who take the time to comment or write you an email. And they, because they're the most diehard, usually have an extreme ideology one way to the left or to the right. But a lot of people mistake those signals and those feedback loops for what the public thinks. And I think that's a mistake. I think that internet echo chambers and backlash aren't representative of real life. And so I take solace in that fact, even when I'm getting dogpiled on Twitter, though in real life, what I'm saying is perfectly mainstream and reasonable.
There seems to be a fractioning on the right occurring that I've seen accelerate in the past few months in particular. And there's the right wing, as somebody who was of the left and ended up being lost in the center, the right was very open, but now it seems like there's a purity test on the right. The people in that kind of group seem to be expanding, or they're more vocal. I mean, my husband and I were talking about this before I came on to talk with you. Is this stuff that you're seeing coming from the right wing about gay marriage and the backlash to this, was it something that always existed and they were just keeping it on the down low? Or is it something that's occurring as a reaction to the trans stuff? That's what I can't seem to tease out. It seems like some of it was already there. And were they just hiding it?
So I think it's a bit of both, frankly, in that I think some of the most high profile pundits on the right a few years ago felt the pressure to moderate on LGBT issues because that's where the base was at. The right has now, you have majority support for gay marriage, for example. And as of very recent polling, that's still the case. So okay, maybe I'll say this. and I'll have a kind of middle of the road approach. Like, I don't personally support gay marriage, but it's the law of the land, and they're no longer railing against it. Or I don't care what adults do. Caitlyn Jenner, I don't care, whatever. And so they would take a more middle of the road approach, but at their heart, they were still the same dude from 2010 who was preaching about how being gay is a sin and repent. But they felt the need to moderate. And some of these pundits now have, I think, found permission slips from the backlash that's occurring among the very online and very engaged base in response to the extreme left stuff to go mask off and let their inner anti-gay freak flag fly, honestly. But I think, and it's a little demoralizing to me because 2 years ago, I would have told you homophobia on the right was like barely a thing anymore.
Yeah.
And now it's like, whoa, we've seen some backsliding, at least in the very online echo. I mean, even the thing about monkeypox, I went viral and was getting roasted because I got into a debate with someone on TV where they were saying monkeypox won't be a problem if gay people just stop having orgies. And they were like throwing disgust. And I'm like, dude, why are we victim blaming sick people? Right? Like, this is not cool. Right now it's in the gay community, but it can and has spread by everyone before. It's like, that's very retro attitude. That's like a throwback to the HIV epidemic of shaming and victim blaming people who got sick with life-threatening illness. And I thought that was gone, but that resurged its ugly head. And to me, that's kind of a microism of everything we're seeing. It's like some of it was always there lying dormant and is reemerging. But then some of it is, I even get this in my comments. When I say, for example, let transgender adults live however they want. Let's not do that. They say, we tried that and they pushed surgery for minors. No, we've got to go. Time to fight fire with fire. But
right.
The toxic approach. I think when you fight fire with fire, you burn the whole house down. You just corrode the principles because and undermine them for the future for everybody.
Yes, there does seem to be a very strong contingency online of people who are like, see, it was a slippery slope. We warned you. You know, like we told you gay marriage was a slippery slope, and now here we are. And there is, and that's not surprising to me. It's just the gay rights movement does seem to have been co-opted to a certain extent. And I loved Dave Chappelle's whole bit about how the in the car with the gays and the G's and the T's, and he's talking about how they're like, oh, we got to let this guy in, but he's taking up all the attention and getting them in trouble. And it's weird though, because I don't think that the gay rights and gay marriage, that movement wasn't as aggressive as the trans rights activists seem to be. There just seems to be a difference in the way they're going about the fight. It doesn't feel the same to me as someone who's lived through both of these movements. And I think it's hard for people who are, there's a lot of talk in one of my group chats, which is where, you know, all the real conversations go down before they make it out into the into the punditry world. There's a lot of talk about TERF in USA and how a lot of the trans ideology that has made its way into the curriculums with younger kids learning about this, well, not even trans ideology, but gender ideology in particular, into 6-year-olds learning about this. And then COVID hit and parents are like, what are you learning about? They had access into a window into what their kids, they were sitting there listening to it. And it was this weird confluence of it kind of exploding in the culture and the mainstream and politics being pushed everywhere. And then also parents hearing about what their kids were learning. And the moms are getting very active about this stuff. And I feel like I worry about the backlash. You know, I'm starting to see what I was worried about 2 years ago when I started seeing people reacting to this and the way that libs of TikTok was blowing up, but sometimes the way it's presented and okay groomer, I saw you pushing back against a lot of this. Now we're back to the idea that all gay people are just pedophiles trying to groom children. And that's an idea that it's so crazy to me to see that in prevalent conversations again.
I'm pulling my hair out with that one because simultaneously two things can be true at once. We are seeing activists push things that are not age appropriate for children.
Definitely.
Whether it's spending twerking in front of children at drag queen story hour, or teachers who you'll see these videos where they're like, I make my kids pledge allegiance to the rainbow flag. I don't have an American flag. Or I teach my kids that there are a gazillion genders, blah, 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 blah. I'm happy to criticize all of that. Hard to know how truly prevalent it is. A lot of it's anecdotal, but to the extent that it's prevalent, I'm happy to criticize all of it. I'm very, though, against the okay groomer rhetoric of conflating a behavior that's not age appropriate, exposing kids to things that's not appropriate, with actually groomer is a term that refers to predators and how they prep victims for sexual abuse. And it feels disrespectful to victims of actual sexual abuse to conflate like an age inappropriate lesson in the kindergarten class with the actual experience of a sexual assault and trauma survivor, which is that's where that language comes from. And of course, it is a long stereotype that gay people or LGBT people are more likely to molest children, though statistically it's untrue. It's been extensively debunked. And so it's very disheartening to me to see people push this rhetoric because they are kind of casting with far too broad a brush. I bet you if I showed one of these libs of TikTok videos of an inappropriate child drag show, if I walked around a gay bar in New York City and was like, are you okay with this? Are you okay with this? Most of them would be like, no, that's weird.
Yeah.
Like, this is a very online thing that activists defend, but they're not representative of your average lesbian or gay person at all in that. I think it's like a tiny fringe base that has really overtaken the LGBT community in the public eye because they're the activists that get invited on CNN or profiled in the New York Times as the visionary queer activist breaking down boundaries, or they have a huge TikTok audience, but like your average gay person in America is freaking normal, man.
Yeah.
Like they're not pushing child drag shows. They want to get married and buy a house and have a job, and they're reasonable. Like it's not and so that's one thing about the rights backlash that I don't like is they're using this as a stand-in, this unrepresentative activist class for an entire demographic of people, many of whom just aren't at all represented by it. But to your earlier point about how the gay rights movement has been co-opted by extremists, I think that's absolutely correct. But I think it's unfortunately kind of inherent to the nature of an activist movement. Because you have to think, I did a profile on the Human Rights Campaign, which a few years ago, which is the nation's oldest gay rights organization. They would say LGBTQ rights now. They basically accomplished all the goals that they set out to do.
Wow.
They got gay marriage. They got discrimination laws, protections. So then it's like, well, hang on. We've got an $8 million office in Washington, D.C. We've got an entire staff of 70 people. We've got celebrity galas every year with the biggest stars in the world coming to do our events. We're quoted in the newspaper all the time. And now their cause has been mostly achieved. Well, they're going to have to come up with a new cause to maintain their own relevance.
Right.
The donor money flowing in. It's like Thomas Sowell, who's a very famous conservative economist, he writes about this in his book I have behind me, Basic Economics, about how nonprofit organizations essentially can become captured by mission creep. Because say that you build jobs, dependency, livelihood, lifestyles, into a goal that you then accomplish, say curing cancer. You build a really good nonprofit that's dedicated to curing cancer. You raise millions of dollars. You've got executives with big salaries doing great work, and then you cure cancer.
Right.
Do you shut up shop and all go home? No, maybe your nonprofit becomes for survivors of cancer. advocating for survivors. Well, then what do you do when the other survivors all kind of age out and move on and die 100 years down the line? Well, now we're a nonprofit for the descendants of cancer survivors. And it's like, you can see how this would become over time more and more almost at a parody level. I
Yes.
think that's what we're starting to see with the gay rights movement is they got their ball, and instead of going home, they decided they need to invent a new game because they became addicted to the limelight. Um, and that they had to move as a result to more and more extreme territory that then has now endangered the progress they previously achieved, frankly.
Well, and wouldn't that be a good thing? Because now you're just back to square one and you can keep the. Michael Crichton wrote about this in State of Fear, actually. It was a book that got him pretty much canceled, but he was talking about this as in relation to environmental activists. And it gets very extreme in his book. They're blowing things up and creating all these problems in order to keep their organizations going, to keep the money, the gravy train rolling. And because of his ideas and thoughts and subtle pushback against some of the science in the book, I think he ended up getting canceled for that book. It's crazy. But that, yeah, he kind of takes this idea on in that book, and I think it's absolutely the case. Now, that brings me to the question, how do you prevent that from happening to your nonprofit?
Well, we're a libertarian nonprofit, and I will say I don't envision our world becoming in line with libertarianism anytime soon. But I guess the main thing is we're going to keep it really small. It's just me and my business partner, Hannah Cox, and my business partner, Jack Hunter. It's the three of us. At most, we might ever grow to 5 or 6 people. Because the funny thing about nonprofits is I've worked in nonprofits in the conservative and libertarian movements, and the bigger they get, the more bureaucratic and almost like a government agency they start to function.
Yeah.
So it's really ironic because the people who rail against government inefficiency and for free markets and profit, well, then they form these big nonprofits with 200 employees that do absolutely nothing. And that in order to release anything, it like takes 10 months and has to go through 3 departments and review processes. And it's like, it ends up being deeply hypocritical. So I think personally for our nonprofit based politics, the thing we're going to do to safeguard against that is mostly keep it small. And then I don't anticipate us having the problem where society becomes so libertarian and we shrink the government and get back to the Constitution enough that we can shut up shop and go home. But I'll tell you, I would happily do that. And I think I could make another part of the reason I don't fear getting canceled anymore. I used to fear it. Part of it is that I'm now independent and doing my own thing. But part of it's also that I think I could be happy with my life, even if I had to walk away from all this. I have always been a little bit of an attention whore. So I do think I'd miss the limelight a little bit. But you know what? I could be a soccer coach and a high school civics teacher and live in my house with my boyfriend and my dog in West Michigan. And I think I could be just happy without Twitter, without going on TV. And I think I'd get over it. And I think I'd be just fine. So that gives me a little bit of solace. And I guess that's what I'll do. We won't move on and become an anarchist organization because we achieved our original goals. I don't think we'll do that. I think we would actually just shut up shop, frankly. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I want to know how you kind of ended up in this space and what your background is and why politics and commentary.
So it's kind of a funny story. I've always been a little bit contrarian, a little bit argumentative, and like I said, a little bit of an attention whore. But I went into college thinking that I wanted to be a lawyer and a litigator, basically.
Where are you from?
I'm from Massachusetts, and I went to the University of Massachusetts Amherst.
Okay.
And which is just the big public school in Massachusetts, basically. And I went into college thinking I wanted to be a lawyer and go to law school. And so I joined mock trial, which is like legal competition debate style. And I got super into it. I did it all through college. I was the club captain my senior year, and I was pretty good at it. I would say so myself. But then I also just kind of for a lark on the side, I was like, oh, well, I should do something else extracurricular. What will I do? Walking around the student fair. Oh, maybe the campus newspaper. Maybe I could do that. And then I was at the first meeting and they're like, what section do you want to do? I was like, I don't know. And they were like, well, we need more people for the opinion section. So go over there. And then I ended up there at the independent student newspaper. And I ended up writing an opinion column for the student newspaper. And it was, let me just put this in context, the furthest left of campuses. It is a bastion of like woke to the point of almost parody. And it's actually the only college in the continental United States with an openly Marxist economics department.
Wow.
Because normally Marxism and economists don't go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
But at UMass, they've got just about most of the actual Marxist economists in that department. And that's what I was majoring in. I was majoring in economics. So I was put into this like, I mean, they literally, when Trump won, my professors canceled class or had feelings sessions.
I know.
Like they had a cry-in basically on campus.
You were in college during this. That's I bet it was amazing.
So that tells you what kind of an atmosphere it was. I was repulsed by all of that, frankly, and I had kind of not been super political in high school. Not been super involved or whatever, but then I was like, oh, maybe I'm right wing, maybe I'm conservative, but then I really was put off by Trump and not into him. It was not the vibe.
Were you out already?
Well, that's actually was what I was about to say, is I was also at that same exact time going through the process of self-acceptance and realizing I was gay and coming out and all that. I was eventually outed both to my family and to at the campus by gays that didn't like me.
What?
Yeah.
That sounds like a story.
Yeah, that's a story as well. But I was like, well, I'm not a social conservative. I'm a social moderate, but I'm an economic conservative. I'm a constitutional conservative. And so I kind of was drawn to the right wing ideologically during my college time because I was so repulsed by the left. And then I started to write some very center right, like free speech, basic pro Second Amendment, pro due process kind of opinion columns for the student newspaper. And the backlash that I received was unhinged. Like people, this will date me a little bit. I'm only 25, but people still used Facebook back then. Mm-hmm. And every time locally in the Amherst area, I published a column, #Brad is bad would trend locally. And I would even get death threats. There was a petition started by alumni who used to work at the student newspaper, calling on the newspaper to fire me, saying I was a fascist, all this stuff, saying my people claimed my articles insert XYZ, LGBT, women, minorities in danger, all the kind of unhinged backlash you get from the woke left. And I loved it. I broke the student newspaper's traffic record for an article. Then I broke it again, like 8 times, my own record. And then I was summarily fired from the student newspaper, which was run by very liberal students. I actually remember crying, thinking, because I had decided I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. I wanted to be a journalist. I remember calling my uncle, who was very influential in my life at that time, saying, I don't think I'm never going to get to be a journalist. I can't even make it at the student newspaper. I was just fired. And I don't think at that time I realized how big the media ecosystem and how diverse it was. And so thankfully that wasn't the case. But for example, the kinds of things that got me in trouble at the campus newspaper, where I had a colleague who identified as non-binary, they, them. And I don't really believe in that, to be frank. I think that's kind of nonsense. However, I'm not a jerk. So I was not purposefully ever being like using he pronouns to refer to this colleague. I would usually just use this colleague's name and say like, okay, well, Nate told me this. And so I wasn't a jerk about it, but I don't really believe in that. But I used the expression, we were debating something, and this person was saying something was Islamophobic that really wasn't. And I was saying, you're being the boy who cried wolf. And I was formally written up and disciplined for misgendering a colleague and told that if it happened again, I would be fired.
You would say that about a girl, though. It's an expression.
Yes, exactly. It's a freaking expression. I would say that about a girl. It's like is
You wouldn't
obviously
say you're being the
absurd.
girl who cried wolf to a girl. You would say you're being it's just the colloquial expression.
Yes, exactly. It was insane. And so it was that kind of thing, one after another. And eventually they just fired me from the student newspaper, which was a blessing in disguise. It was deeply dysfunctional. And I then started writing professionally while I was still in college for conservative media and such. After graduating college, I went and worked in conservative media. And so then I quickly realized, wow, the right has a lot of problems too. And so kind of seeing that and then learning also this was during the rise of Trump, and I was not a super anti-Trump. He's literally Hitler, but I
Yeah.
was hit or miss with me. Some of the things he did I wasn't okay with. I thought he said a lot of dumb or bad things, did some things I really disagreed with. And so I was kind of put off by a lot of conservative media. I realized a lot of them, I also watched them go from super anti-Trump to all of a sudden super pro-Trump. And I'm like, you're the same dude. This is the same outlet. This is the same television show. And you've just done a 180 here. So what do you really believe?
Yeah.
And so I was put off by all of that. And then I kind of drifted more towards a libertarian ideological bent and more towards independent media as a result. And since then, I've kind of been making my own way ever since, culminating in launching Base Politics, which is a nonprofit. One of the big things we do is host a podcast. So if people are still listening at this point, it means they probably find me not too insufferable. So they should probably check out our podcast. It's Based Politics as well, if they want to hear me talk more. But yeah, that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at in a condensed version.
And were you raised political? Was there, were you raised to be conservative or liberal? Were politics a part of your upbringing, or was it something that was your family was more apolitical and it wasn't something you even really thought about until you were older?
Yeah, not really, not very political. I grew up in Massachusetts, which is obviously a pretty blue area, and Rhode Island as well. I lived there, but they're
Where in
both
Rhode
pretty
Island?
blue. The Providence area.
Okay. That's
So,
where my family is.
Oh, okay. That's where I grew up, and then I moved to Massachusetts while I early teenage years. Both blue states, but both times it was a little more rural. I wasn't in the city or anything. So you have a mix, right? My mom has always been kind of a center left Democrat voter, but now she feels kind of left behind by the Democrats. She's like, I haven't moved, but they're now all over there.
That's what I hear from all of these older libs.
But then my dad is definitely more on the Republican side, but neither of them were like politically active very much or involved or anything. And it wasn't a big part of my childhood or anything. So nobody's a blank slate, but I will say I went into college as a relatively blank slate. Like I had maybe some leanings or instincts from high school, having talked about stuff in classes or whatever, but it really wasn't any sort of worldview or political affiliation. And then I went in and kind of was thrown in amongst the furthest left wokiest stuff. I mean, my dorm had Care Bears put up. This is a dorm for sophomores and juniors, not even freshmen. It had Care Bears put up on the walls that said, "Remember to brush your teeth twice a day. Remember to drink at least 4 glasses of water every day." And I'm like, are we freaking toddlers?
Yeah.
Like, if you need these reminders from Care Bears of all sources, you probably shouldn't be in college. You should probably be getting help.
Yeah.
But so that was that atmosphere. And like I said, it kind of boomeranged me. And then I came back a little more towards the middle over time.
Yeah. I feel like up until pretty recently, there was this sensibility that if you were gay, you were just on the left. I don't know that there was very much room because it was the moral majority and the sense that there was, God only believes in a man and a woman being married. And that was the right wing that I grew up with. And they seem to have, like we talked about at the start of this conversation, expanded their tent. Although now I would say my general impression is that it's snapping back to more of the Republican. See, this is why when people were like, you just have to accept you're on the right wing. And I'm like, I don't trust those guys. I don't trust them. I
I
wrote
think
for
you're
Playboy,
right.
and I saw what they said to me when I was writing for Playboy. And even though they might be like, "Come to us, come," I'm like, I know what lurks. I've seen it. I know what lurks underneath.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I think Trump kind of changed it for me. Like I said, lots of things I didn't agree on, but he literally ran on. He was elected president saying, "Yeah, I'm fine with gay marriage."
Yeah, he was open to
more
it.
liberal on that than Obama was when he
Yeah.
was elected president.
Yeah.
So I think because I was politically coming of age in that 2015, 2016 time, where Republicans were increasingly like chill about gay issues, that I was among the first generation of young gay men who didn't feel like they had to by default be a Democrat or a progressive.
Right.
And now you see with Gen Z and younger millennials, like a lot of gay people aren't woke and aren't falling for the far left stuff. A lot of them aren't like Republicans or conservatives because they're still off put by a lot of the boomer Republican stuff. But they're like center right leaning in their sympathies or ideologies because they've grown up with a sense of freedom that previous generations of gays lacked. And I totally understand it. I probably, if I was born in 1970, would have been a Democrat or a liberal because I would have been like, I want rights and acceptance.
Right.
But I think, though, it's a sign of tremendous progress that gay people increasingly get to be individuals who can have a wide array of opinions on different issues that aren't to do with their sexual orientation. It's like the idea that in 2023, because I'm gay, I should have to be a Democrat or I should have to be a liberal. I'm actually a thinking, independent human being with deeply held values on things like gun rights and economic systems and foreign policy and immigration. And it's like the idea that because my sexual orientation is a certain way, I should have to be on board with an entire agenda and ideology. It's a hard pass for me.
Right.
That never made any sense. And I think it's a sign of progress that people increasingly feel free from that. And that's one of the things I hope isn't going to change, but will change if the right keeps, like you said, snapping back the tent and being more regressive on these issues. Well, there goes. I mean, Trump got like 15% of the LGBT vote, and that's with all his baggage. I think somebody like DeSantis in a 2024 scenario could get 20, 25% of the LGBT vote. And it could keep going up if they just are chill and normal. But apparently that's increasingly a too much to ask from a lot of people on the right.
Yeah, I mean, I think you saw it too with I saw a lot of it around Roe v. Wade and the rhetoric and all that stuff. I'm like, they just, and I've had very smart people come on and talk to me about why that being rolled back and kicked down to the states is actually a good thing for federalism and why it's the way that it should be legally. And it was always kind of an activist, but at the same time, like they just can't help themselves. Like they just seem to be getting momentum and changing hearts and minds and converting people to maybe consider coming over to their side or even get interested in hearing what they have to say. And then I don't know, there's just a general rhetoric and lack of compassion that I think you are pointing out, and I've seen a lot of people pointing out. I was fascinated by yesterday that woman who left the Daily Wire and then publicly, Jen Buttons, is that her name?
Christina Buttons, I believe.
Christina Buttons, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
She did this big announcement and said she was leaving because of a lot of the ways that people, pundits and Michael Knowles and Matt Walsh have talked about the trans ideology and trans movement and trans people, and calling them ugly, attacking their looks, calling them subhuman, some of these things that Matt Walsh has done.
Yeah. It's just mean-spirited.
Mean-spirited. And I was looking at the quote tweets and it was fascinating. I could write an entire piece just about what the divide that I see was right in all of those quote tweets. You would have somebody saying, "This is so great, stick by your principles," and then the next comment down is like, "This is war. We gave them quarter. There is no quarter anymore. We have to fight fire with fire, like you said. I understand the argument. I understand it because so much of this institutional capture that has occurred is it's already too late. It's like you said, in college, these ideologies have captured our prisons. They've captured our government. It is everywhere. You can't escape it. And they have the real power culturally and now institutionally. And so how do you even fight that? How do you fight against if you in your mind are trying to protect your children, which is I think where many people land in this fight, because this ideology has trickled down into the school systems and online and TikTok, all these places. How do you protect your kids from that? I was in Texas recently, and that it is the conversation I have with almost every mother. Mothers in Los Angeles, they're like, what school can I send my kid to where someone isn't going to talk to them about whether they're a boy or a girl at age 5 or 6? This is a real concern. And I feel like it gets minimized by the left all the time. And this is this kind of idea of turf in USA where you're seeing it's a grumbling and a backlash, but these guys are capitalizing on that dissatisfaction, and it can become something that ends up in real bigoted language and anger and a lot of the stuff that we'd like to avoid when you're talking about any kind of individual or person or adult who's just trying to live their life. And I don't like it. I don't like where any of it's headed.
I think they're going to ruin for example, something like, hey, don't talk to K through 3 students about sexual orientation and gender identity, which was what DeSantis's law was.
Right.
No classroom instruction about K through 3 about sexual orientation or gender identity. That's like pretty common sense to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Nobody's really going to be that up in arms about it. In fact, you could get a majority of support for that. But what these people don't seem to realize is that we live in a country where, whether it's at the state level or the local level or the national level, you need majority consensus to enact your change and your policies. And if you conflate your reasonable positions, protect kids, protect trans sports, with ban transgender people from public life, make it illegal for adults to transition, or like we were talking, you're bringing up abortion. I would say I'm moderate pro-life, but no exceptions for rape and incest is what the governor candidate ran in my state on. And that is why she lost. She could have potentially won on a position of making most abortions illegal, but getting, some exceptions, right? And instead she loses because she wants to be against all of them. And frankly, women don't support that. And women voters aren't going to vote for somebody like that. And it's this case of embracing the extreme because you feel threatened. In doing so, you will rally up your base, but you can't win or govern with your base because your base is like at most 15% of the country on either side. And you actually need to build a majoritarian consensus. And you don't do that by conflating the most extreme and toxic rhetoric and the furthest, most extreme belief with your reasonable concerns and pushback. If you want to actually accomplish something to protect kids or to, ensure fairness in sports, the worst possible way to do that is to tell people that in order to support you in that, you must join us with the maximalist anti-trans position.
Yeah.
Because most people aren't on board with that.
No, and they'll reject it, and then they'll feel they won't want to be associated with that. So they'll feel instinctively like they have to retreat back to the safety of the left, for instance, if they were someone who is maybe becoming red-pilled. And I see this a lot too, because if you're I've been through this on my own personal level as someone who woke up and got caught in the crossfire of the culture wars and then would do some right-wing media, but then something would come out from the right wing that was just so extreme, or a position. And it was something that I was like, oh, am I carrying water. There was all this fear that I was actually signing up for a team that was evil. And it's funny too, because you'll see people kind of demand apologies from the right for their language, or you'll see people even in the right fighting amongst themselves and saying, oh, are we being too mean to the Democrats, for instance? But I never see that on the left. And so this is where I understand the people on the right who are like, F that. These people give us, they never say, are we being too mean to Republicans? Ever. There's none of that self-reflection ever. It doesn't happen. And I think this is where when they say we're fighting fire with fire, that sense of war comes from within them, where they're always having to kind of bend the knee to the left and be contrite, whereas the left will just do whatever they want and take whatever power they need, however they want to take it, and never self-reflect or apologize or say, maybe we were mean by calling everybody on the right a deplorable for voting for this guy. Maybe they'll have a second moment of it, but it seems they're not held to those rules at all. It's very confusing. So I can understand why someone who's just an average person following all of this, if you were like, yeah, I'm against transitioning children, I don't want my kids to learn about this stuff, but then you see some more inflammatory rhetoric because that's the way you're getting media, is just these inflammatory sound bites from both sides. And then you're like, never mind. I'm not on board with that. So I guess I'm not on board with this group in general. And so it bounces you back to either maybe a more libertarian position if you're a thinking person, or you're somebody who's caught in the middle or no longer likes any of it, or just retreat to the safety of the tribe you came from because it's easier and safer.
But it's a question of, I do understand what you're saying about why people get in this place where like fight fire with fire. Mm-hmm. But I guess it's a question of, are you willing to become what you hate to fight the other side? Because what they're essentially saying is, we need to adopt the left's tactics to defeat the left. And it's like, well, the whole reason I oppose the left is because like the tactics are the principles. Like, you are what you do and how you treat people. And so I'm not like, this happens with cancel culture. It's like, I don't believe in cancel culture. So there's been instances where the right has tried to cancel people.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't really support that. Like, I'll criticize something someone said, but with rare exceptions, I'm not trying to get them fired or canceled or dox them and so, because that's wrong. And it's still wrong if you're doing it in response to other people who are doing it to you. I mean, for many of these people are followers of Christ. I am not religious, but I know enough about the Bible to say, like, turn the other cheek is the entire concept. Love thy enemy. It's not own thy enemy because they're trying to own you. Mm-hmm. Is not actually how that's supposed to work. And honestly, I don't think it is mutually exclusive, either adopt their tactics or lose, but I'd rather lose and sleep well at night knowing that I stood up for the things that are right than become just as bad as the other side and then successfully defeat them using their same vicious tactics that I originally abhorred in the first place. I think I would rather lose and be able to look myself in the mirror and be proud of myself than win a surface level victory, but have hollowed myself out in the process.
Yeah, it was interesting reading all those quote tweets. I'll tell you, if you want a full spectrum of the debate that is going to play out in the next 2 years, in my opinion, between moderates and radicals, that's the other big fight I see occurring, is the people who are moderate or centrist or trying to be principled or libertarian versus these people on the extremes who essentially feel like they're useless on both sides. And that might be the case, actually, but I still feel like there should be room for all of it. That's what makes America healthy and America. Having people be able to have firmly held beliefs or be able to take things piece by piece or feel confused or feel lost or feel like they don't belong or feel passionate about their team that they might feel like they're on, or their political party team. And it was fascinating reading all that, because there's there's a chasm that's occurring in the right wing that's expanding rapidly. And I think depending on how 2024 goes, we're going to see that rift grow even more. And it was growing during Trump, but now that there is a ideological purity on the right that is really blossoming, that you're starting to see. And I think that will really bloom in the next year or two. And the debate, the kind of fight between moderates and the radicals that seems to be heating up more and more. I saw that in the comments. It's really interesting. Those seem to be, if I were to kind of predict the trend, what the trends are, the left is a little bit in disarray because they don't have anyone they can get behind. So they feel a little disorganized and a bit in disarray. And I'm a little unsettled as to where all of that energy will go in the next year or two. But there does seem to be some interesting trends on the right, and even in the center of where the space I would say you and I probably occupy, where I'm very used to getting told I'm useless from everyone. And I'll hear it in the same day, and I don't think this makes me better. I think there's a lot of things that are accurate about the criticism of the positions or lack of positions that I hold. But I will hear in the same day from people that I'm kind of useless, or this idea of centrism is a absolute waste. And I'll hear it from both the left and the right. And I can't help but laugh. I'm like, you do realize you sound exactly like the people you hate, right? Like that's just the funniest part for me, is like, okay, I heard this from your enemy the other day too.
Well, I love when I get a piece of hate mail and I can't tell if it's a woke person or an alt-right person.
That happens to me a lot.
I got a piece of hate mail that opened by calling me a cuck. So I'm like, oh, this is a far-right person.
Yeah.
But then it accused me of being a QAnon MAGA fascist. So I'm like, hold up. Where is this person coming from?
That's crazy. They're adopting each other's language.
I literally could not tell. It's like the simulation has merged.
And that's what's funny that's the piece I feel like people who are in their own, very centered in their own belief, which I respect, they don't understand how similar they sound to people that are completely maybe opposed to them on every single point. But I don't know why, I think it's so funny every time it happens when someone's like, you need to take a side and you need to fight because the other side is evil. It always just makes me giggle. I'm like, you sound like your enemy. Why am I supposed to take this seriously?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a very strange. I feel like I've resigned to my uselessness. I just like talking to everybody. I'm very interested in what everybody has to think, how they get to the place where they're coming from. But I don't by any means think I have the answers or think I'm right. There's so many people in this country, and they all come from such different backgrounds and economics, and I feel like I would probably understand how anyone got to the point that they were at in America and the beliefs that they had if I had lived their life. But I don't know. It's not, it feels a little, I was always worried about this because I knew that whatever backlash was coming to the extreme of the left, which has been very extreme.
Oh yeah.
Very extreme for going on decades now. I knew it was going to be, I don't know. It just makes me nervous.
Yeah, me too. I will say it's like, at a certain point, the left called everyone racist for a long time, to the point where people on the right felt like, well, they're going to call us racist no matter what we do. Now you start to see them tolerating some people who are actually kind of racist. It's like you've seen that play out across the many issues, I think, and it's disappointing to anybody who is really in that center right position and truly believes in the things they believe in, because it's corrosive but I don't have the answers. I guess all I can try to do is swim in my own lane against the stream and do my thing. And I don't really, I guess if you think about it too much, you'll get depressed. You just got to keep on keeping on. And you're a small part of it. Make sure you're not contributing to that problem.
What is your, I'll end with I have so many more questions, but I'll end with my 2 questions I ask all of my guests. What is your biggest defect of character? Speaking of adding to, not being a part of the problem.
My personal, I would say probably sometimes lacking intellectual curiosity and or intellectual arrogance, thinking just like I know everything. I definitely thought that I had everything figured out, and I've doubted myself more, but I probably need to doubt myself more of how certain I am in some of my positions because I'm a generalist, so I cover tons of stuff. And the truth is, I'm not an expert in most of the things I talk about. And so sometimes I'll have a really hot take about something, and then I'll realize I'll learn more information later, and I'll be like, oh, I wish I kind of had a more nuanced take on that. But in the moment, it was because I was being intellectually arrogant. Because I do think I'm right about most things. That's how people tend to think. But a lot of us in this business lack intellectual curiosity or don't leave enough space for the possibility they may be wrong. And that's definitely something I'm guilty of.
See, I'm the opposite. I think I'm wrong about everything. That's the position I come from. I just assume I'm probably wrong. I probably need more confidence in my ideas. What is your biggest asset?
Definitely my looks. Definitely my beauty.
You're very handsome.
Kidding. No,
you look great on camera.
Thank you. I do have expensive lights and a nice camera and everything. So I've thought about teaching myself to do a little makeup. So that on camera. Yeah, because when I used to do TV, they'll do makeup for you, but all my camera stuff is at home now.
Right.
So my biggest asset, I would say I'm very good thinking on my feet, debating, off the cuff speaking in a way that I don't have to. And I think I'm also very good at breaking things down, like taking something complicated and explaining it in a way that everyday people can follow who aren't experts or aren't wonks. Especially with libertarians. A lot of libertarians are smart, but they're really nerdy.
Yeah.
And when they talk, they sound like a professor and no one has any idea what they're saying, or they sound like a complete geek, so nobody wants to listen. I think I'm pretty good at taking, the studies that they do, the books they write, the papers they write, taking some of the ideas and distilling them down into a way that like normies can understand and actually be interested in. Whereas a lot of people kind of in my camp aren't so good at that.
Yeah, I think too, what I've noticed about libertarians is they're very much policy wonks. They focus a lot on policy, and most people they're not, unfortunately for all of us, that interested in it. And so it's helpful to have somebody who can make that kind of content that is clickable and quick, and you can get an idea of it. Where can we find all of your stuff?
Well, definitely check out the Based Politics podcast. Just search there, or check me out on YouTube. Just search my name, Brad Polumbo. Or I'm on all the social medias, Twitter, Instagram are the main ones. You can search on TikTok for Based Politics. Haven't been banned there yet. By the time you listen to this, there's a good chance I'll be banned. So instead, I'll just plug the podcast and the YouTube. Brad Polumbo, Based Politics is the podcast. Brad Polumbo is the YouTube. Those are more permanent, I hope.
And Twitter, you're Brad Polumbo.
Yes. Twitter, just Brad Polumbo. Though Twitter is increasingly follow me somewhere else because I spend less and less time on Twitter.
Yeah, me too. I've noticed that. It's not the same. I don't know.
It's not fun anymore.
It hasn't been fun for a while, but now it just feels actually kind of broken. So it hasn't been fun for a while, and now it just feels like it doesn't even really work. Well, this has been so much fun. I really appreciate your perspective out there. I use it to try and balance and take everything in. I appreciate that you stand your ground and you're not afraid to get, it sounds like you were trained well in college for being piled on and hated. So I'm glad you have that armor because we need you out there.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
All month long on Pluto TV, stream the biggest Tyler Perry movies free. Watch your favorites like Medea's Witness Protection and Medea's Big Happy Family. Join Tyler Perry as he goes on a couples retreat with Sharon Leal in Why Did I Get Married? Or Idris Elba and Gabrielle Union in the Tyler Perry directed film Daddy's Little Girls. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies and TV shows. Available on live and on demand. Download the free Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming now. Pluto TV. Drop in, watch free.
It's time for the weekly check-in with Bridget and cousin Maggie.
How you doing?
I'm good. We closed.
Yay! You're a homeowner.
I haven't even had a chance to let it land because I've been so busy today.
All day.
Matilda's is excited.
Baby squeaking in the background.
Mm-hmm. The child is excited.
She's excited to have a home of her very own.
She's going to be a Texas kid.
I know. That's so weird. She's going to grow up only remembering living in Texas.
I know.
But she'll be mocked by her friends for being born in California.
Hopefully. Hopefully she'll be a global baby. Yeah, everything's good. It's just been, I think we'll just look back on this time and be like, that was fucking nuts.
I know.
Jaren's studying for like his licensing in the middle of this. He had to do a walkthrough today, like the remote walkthrough with the baby because we thought I'd be done, but the thing got pushed, my podcast. And so nobody was here to help him. And so he had to do the walkthrough. It was like, it's just been, even with only two of us, it still hasn't been enough.
Yeah. No, because I haven't been able to be there because I'm a mess. And I've had all these things hitting me at the worst time ever.
Yeah, health is wealth, man.
I know.
My
back's all screwed up. I've got migraines now. What the hell is going on?
I saw my old friend, and he said that he started getting migraines after he got the jab.
Oh, boy. Well, all the women I've talked to have been like in their late 30s they started. So I was like, oh, yeah. And I just like ordered a bunch. I ordered some AG1. I ordered some vitamins. I'm like, I'm going to stop this in its tracks.
Yeah. It really does make you realize like what
you have nothing.
Yeah, you have nothing if you don't have your health. And even like I've had this stupid irritating groin injury for like ever. And it's been, it could be a lot worse, but it's just slowed me down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm concerned about being able to pack and move boxes and like bend over. I can't even bend over right now because my back's a mess. So I'm going to have to like hire someone to help me.
Oh, gosh. That's not good.
No, I know. And I'm like, what the hell? It kind of came out of the blue. I mean, my back gets fucked up every now and then, but this is bad. And it's just so annoying. I'm like, this is the worst timing ever.
Yeah. So, it could be stress.
Possibly. There's just all sorts of stuff going on.
Stress related.
Possibly.
I feel like
I don't like to think of myself as some sort of person who gets stress related injuries.
No, but it could be. I mean,
it certainly could be. There's been a lot going on lately.
I feel bad because I think I'm wearing, like, my poor husband seems very worn down. Mm-hmm. And I just keep taking on more and more. I'm like, sure, I'll babysit. Sure. He's like, can you just stop? I can tell he wants to kill me.
And I mean, you especially too, like you need to be careful because you are not getting enough sleep at all. And I know we all aren't, but you in particular, you tell yourself you can go forever and eventually you hit the wall.
Yeah. I've been okay about like letting myself off the hook to just being one writing prompt behind. It's tough when the writing prompts are tough just because of all the other stuff going on. But once, when I don't know, I try very hard to I've just been so grateful that to me is my antidote to everything is gratitude because I have my health and I've been sleeping. I've been like,
oh, that's good.
I mean, 5 or 6 hours in a row is a lot for me. So as long as I'm getting 5 or 6 hours, kind of and like consistently, and I wake up and check her and stuff, but I guess after doing like every 2 hours, you're kind of like, this is great. I'm sleeping 4 or 5 hours in a row.
Like I'm sleeping a whole night's worth of sleep.
And I could get more. There are nights like the other night when she went down and I just went down with her, and I probably need to do that more often, but I haven't been able to right now. And that's okay. I'm lucky I have deadlines. I'm lucky I'm busy. And I know a lot of this stuff is just like one-time things that I have to just, and I have realized as much as I freaking hate moving, it feels very familiar, even though it's been a long time.
Okay, interesting.
So it's like,
it's very unfamiliar to me. I've only done it a couple times, but
yeah,
I do. I definitely am trying to be like grateful about just being like, all right, you know, my limbs work and my like I just need to focus on my health a little bit more, and I can get back to, you know, being a little bit just better, and it really makes you appreciate when you're like, oh, you know, I really took that time for granted when nothing was wrong.
Yeah, and it makes you appreciate people who are in chronic pain in a way that you don't, because chronic pain is just, it wears on you. It wears on your like it wears on your psyche, it wears on your body, it just wears you down.
Right. You're just more exhausted because you can't get good sleep because you're in pain.
And it's defeating. There's something very, it's hard to, I think chronic pain is really insidious that way. It can just like really derail. That's why the people who are like, oh, long COVID, it is something that is debilitating, you know, over time. It just wears you down.
Yeah, for sure.
And now they're so crazy with pain meds because of all the addicts, and they were doling it out, and they won't. It's so impossible to get anything. It's so unfair to people who actually need pain medication.
Like in daily life. Yeah.
We had a family member who just had back surgery, and he's in his almost 80s and like cannot for the life of him get any freaking pain medication.
Jesus.
And it's such bullshit because they are the people who pay the price for all these junkies. Fucking junkies, I tell you.
And the doctors who over-medicated them in the first place and made them addicts.
And the pharmaceutical companies who pushed
ultimately them. Yeah. Ultimately them.
Always. Yeah, I can't believe people are on board with these pharmaceutical companies. Yeah, so everything's good. I'm just like, I know that I can preemptively drain myself if I think like I have to do all like if my to-do list is all in my head.
Right. And never ending.
I'll just get overwhelmed and shut down. So and this feels and it also feels very addicty to just be like that. And it will wear me out. And I have to just be like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next right action? Next right action? Next right action? You know, I said yes to some friends who are in town to watch their kid because they were looking for a sitter. And I was like, I wouldn't want just some random sitter, even if it was a referral from someone I knew watching my kid. I was like, I would want them to watch, you know, if they could do it, I would want them because I don't know, it just feels, I was like, what would I want in this situation? I would want someone who has a kid. I have infrastructure. I have like, you know, I don't know. I get it. Yeah. I'm not, but then again, I haven't had like a single non-family member babysit my child. So maybe people are just more chill about that stuff.
Well, I was thinking about that because I was like walking at one point and I was like, you know, just considering like how young I was when I first started babysitting and whatnot. But I was like, with where we lived, there was just the fallback of, I know your parents, you know, like I know your parents. I know where to find you if something like there's just it's the kind of the small town infrastructure of, you know, knowing you can trust these people, this family, whatever. And if something goes wrong, you know, your parents are a phone call away. So it's just like, I don't know. It's just a different kind of situation rather than living in LA, like a big city, and being like.
Also, I think 14-year-olds are different these days. They're I don't know, they're younger or something. They're older in some ways, but they're younger in others.
They're not, they've had like helicopter parents or something.
Because I was like, I was freaking babysitting at 14.
I was babysitting at 12.
Yeah, we were young. I feel like I was like
a 3-month-old and like a 3-year-old.
Yeah, I feel like I was laughing it was either in a dream or as I was drifting to sleep, I started dying laughing. And I was like, in the 80s, they let us babysit. Like we were like 14. And And I guess, yeah, no, it's weird that in that respect, I feel I'm like, I don't really trust anyone. There's something about it too. Just, I'm like, I want her to be able to talk. You know, at least have some kind of
be like
ability to tell me what the hell is going on. It's my lack of trust, clearly, for everyone. Enough. I have trust issues. Yeah. So I don't know. It's just I don't feel overwhelmed by that, but I also think it's a good like glimpse into what having 2 children will be like in case I'm getting any ideas.
Right, for sure. I mean, I can't believe you bought a house today. That's pretty amazing. And it's a sweet house. I
haven't let it land. I'm trying to let everything land and I'm too busy, but I wrote my column about like a love letter to Los Angeles. I've been trying to allow myself to feel emotions like sadness about leaving because it really is like the end of an era.
Yeah, we've lived here so long.
And the beginning of a new adventure, so I'm excited, and I'm very excited to be, I feel like I've been so patient, so I'm excited to be putting my money where my mouth is and like getting out, and people, to every fucking asshole in my comments who's been like, just leave, who doesn't understand I couldn't just leave. I freaking would have 4 years ago.
You would have been gone. Yeah.
If I could have. And now it's nice to not that I even care what they say. It's just annoying when I'm already like, yeah, no shit. Don't like, you think I would have?
You're tormenting me.
Yeah. Like not everything is just simple like that. So now it's nice. I don't want to give this state another dime.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well done, sir.
I have to go. My babysitting duties are going to be starting soon.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. This is Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you are welcome. You know the drill. Please subscribe, rate, comment, share, reach out, tell your friends, send smoke signals, whatever. We love your feedback and we want to hear from you. If you like our work and want to support us, the best way to do that is join Phetasy.com. You'll get access to behind-the-scenes content, outtakes, discounts on merch, and the ability to submit questions for some of our upcoming guests. Support your favorite scrappy little internet heroes at Phetasy.com.